The announcement came on a gray Thursday morning, broadcast over the interstellar relay at the United Nations Intergalactic Exchange Complex in Boulder, Colorado. The alien professor, whose full name was an unspeakable tangle of consonants and vowels, insisted on being called Professor Vell by humans, which sounded like a breeze slipping through a vent. He stood on the stage with his long limbs folded neatly, his pale skin shimmering faintly under the light. "I hereby extend an invitation to all Earth participants," Vell said, his translator unit humming softly, to compete in the first pan-species long-distance marathon. The course will span 120 kilometers, adjusted for gravity equivalence, atmospheric pressures, and biomechanical capacity. There was a soft gasp from the human section of the audience, followed by murmurs and the rustling of paper as someone dropped their clipboard. "This is not a test of speed," Vell added. "It is a challenge of endurance, physiology, and adaptive function, a scientific endeavor. I will be participating myself, alongside representatives from 12 other civilizations." In the back row, a man with shaggy brown hair, worn running shoes, and a faded green windbreaker slowly raised his hand. His name was Owen Eddington. He was not a professional athlete. He was a school janitor who ran to clear his head after long shifts and had finished the Denver Marathon 5 years ago with a respectable time. No one had noticed him come in. "I'll do it," Owen said. The room fell dead silent. A few of the attendees turned around to look at him, as if he might be joking. He wasn't. Vell tilted his elongated head. "You are not among the elite class of your species athletes." "Nope," Owen said, "but I've got a decent pair of lungs and a stubborn streak." "That enough?" Vell blinked once slowly. "We shall see." That was how it started. 3 days later, Owen stood in the medical testing chamber, gripping the treadmill handles while 2 researchers monitored his vitals. He was shirtless, sweat dripping down his back, and his heart rate monitor chirped steadily. "Tell me again why you volunteered," asked Dr. Helena Marn, the project's lead physician. She was tall, sharp-featured, and didn't look like someone who had time for foolishness. Owen breathed heavily. "Because I wanted to. You do realize what this is. This isn't just a run through the park. The course spans 3 climate zones. The air gets thinner past kilometer 70. There's a desert stretch and a simulated lunar terrain. I read the packet. You've had 2 stress fractures in the past 6 years. Your VO2 max is barely above average. You're not a soldier or a biathlete, or I said I read the packet." Helena shook her head, tapping her stylus on the digital chart. "You'll have to pass 3 more tests. If you don't, I'm pulling you. You won't get clearance." "I'll pass," he did. Barely, but he passed. The training began at dawn the next Monday. Vell's team had constructed a portable artificial track that mimicked the conditions of the actual course. It was a monstrous loop, with varying elevations, shifting gravity fields, and microclimate generators. Owen trained on it every day for 6 weeks. He ran through dry heat that cracked his lips and froze his knuckles. He learned to breathe in low-oxygen air, pushing through the ache in his chest until he could take a full lap without blacking out. He lost 12 pounds, scraped his knee down to the bone on a simulated rock slide, and sprained his ankle 3 weeks in. Helena ordered X-rays. The ligaments were inflamed but nothing torn. She gave him a compression brace and told him to rest for 5 days. He rested for 2. "You're going to destroy your foot," she told him, watching him limp across the training compound. "Probably," Owen said, "but not before I cross that finish line." Vell observed Owen's progress with a kind of detached curiosity. The professor trained as well, though his method was different. He floated across terrain with an elegant economy of motion, using his long limbs like stilts. His species was designed for sustained movement across arid planets. He hardly broke a sweat, if he even had sweat glands. "You persist despite low genetic optimization," Vell said one afternoon, watching Owen stumble off the track and collapse onto the grass. "Humans are weird like that," Owen said, chest heaving. "We're not built for anything in particular, but we can survive a lot of stupid." Vell crouched beside him. "I am beginning to believe you." The day of the race arrived with little fanfare. The course was set on a remote high-altitude plateau in Mongolia, where the terrain could be easily modified and the atmosphere controlled. 12 different alien species stood at their respective launch points, each in gear suited to their biology. Vel was at the front, tall and expressionless. Owen stood 3 rows back, bouncing lightly on his heels. He wore standard thermal gear, a hydration pack, and shoes that had been engineered with extra cushioning and grip. His ankle was wrapped, and Helena had given him a final once-over that morning. "You've got 120 kilometers ahead of you," she said. "You're cleared, but I want you to monitor your heart rate. If it spikes, you stop. If you feel dizzy, you stop. You tear that ankle again and you're not recovering in a week. Understand?" "I do." "Good. Don't be stupid." The signal flared in the sky, bright blue and soundless. The race began. Owen started slow. He had no illusions of winning. He just wanted to finish. The first 30 kilometers were smooth. The terrain was rocky but manageable. He kept a steady pace, sipping water, adjusting his breathing. The aliens around him moved like gliding shadows, some hopping, others slithering, all seemingly tireless. By kilometer 50, the sun had intensified. The simulated desert began. Sweat soaked his shirt. His lungs burned. One of the alien competitors collapsed on the dunes and did not rise. Medics arrived in seconds. Owen pressed on. 60 kilometers in, the terrain shifted again. He hit the low oxygen zone. His vision blurred. His ankle throbbed. He fell once, skinning his elbow on gravel. He got up. He slowed to a walk at kilometer 75. His legs felt like lead. He passed another competitor, an insectoid creature with trembling limbs who hissed in pain as it tried to stand. Owen didn't stop. He couldn't. At kilometer 82, it started to rain. Cold, biting, artificial rain meant to simulate alien storm conditions. He slipped on wet rock, crashing hard onto his side. Pain shot through his ribs. He lay there, panting. A drone hovered above him, scanning. "Are you in need of extraction?" it asked in a flat tone. "No," Owen whispered. "Do you require medical aid?" "Not unless my ribs are broken." The drone flashed red and hovered lower. "Initiating scan." A soft pulse passed through his chest. He winced. Fracture detected in rib 5. Hairline. "Recommend cessation of activity." "Recommendation noted," Owen muttered, rolling onto his knees. He stood up slowly. Every breath hurt now, but he could still breathe. He kept walking. At kilometer 95, he saw Vel ahead, moving steadily over the lunar terrain. The professor's gait remained unchanged, but Owen noticed a slight wobble in his stride. Even Vel was tiring. Owen caught up by kilometer 102. They ran side by side in silence for a while, the wind howling around them. "You should not still be moving," Vel said. "I get that a lot. You are injured. Just a crack." Vel turned his head slightly. "Why do this?" "Because I want to see what happens when I don't quit." There was no answer. They kept running. 10 kilometers from the finish, Owen's legs gave out. He landed hard, face first in the gravel. He tasted blood. His nose was bleeding. Another drone hovered overhead. This one hesitated. "Participant Eddington, your vitals are unstable. Recommend immediate cessation." He didn't respond. He pushed up onto his knees. His hands trembled. He wiped his nose on his sleeve and stood, one step. Then another, then another. The finish line was a thin blue arc across the horizon. Vel had pulled ahead again, but it didn't matter now. Owen walked the last 2 kilometers. It took him over an hour. When he crossed the line, he collapsed. Helena was there before the medics, kneeling beside him. "Can't believe you finished," she said, checking his pulse. "Me neither. You're going straight to the hospital." "Do I get a medal?" "Not unless you want it surgically removed from your lungs," Owen groaned. "Worth it?" Vel approached, standing over him silently. After a moment, the professor extended his hand. "You are anomalous." Owen took the hand and shook it, wincing. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week." Vel blinked once. "I will study this." "You do that." And then the medics took him away. The overhead lights in the recovery suite were dimmed to a soft amber glow, casting long shadows over the monitoring equipment surrounding Owen's bed. He'd been unconscious for a full 6 hours before his eyelids fluttered open, and the first thing he saw was a translucent bag of saline dripping slowly into a catheter in his arm. The second was Helena sitting on a metal stool, arms crossed, foot tapping in that specific tempo that suggested she'd been waiting too long for something unpleasant. "You're awake. Good. I need you to tell me how many fingers I'm holding up," she said, raising her hand. "2," Owen croaked, voice dry as sand. "Unless you've got some extra ones tucked in your coat." She leaned closer, shining a small penlight into his eyes. "Pupil reactions sluggish. You're dehydrated, borderline hypothermic, and you've got a cracked rib and a mild concussion. Also, your right ankle's swelling again because you didn't keep off it like I specifically told you to. It's not like I ran 120 kilometers or anything," he muttered. "You didn't run. You hobbled, limped, collapsed, and dragged yourself most of the final stretch. And don't think I didn't see you try to wave off the medics when you crossed the line. You were barely coherent. Still counts." Helena pulled over a rolling table and set a cup of thick orange fluid in front of him. Electrolyte slurry. "Drink it, or I'm putting it through a tube." He took a cautious sip, grimacing. "Tastes like someone crushed a battery into soup." "Good, that means it's working." The door slid open without sound and Vel entered, ducking slightly under the frame. He carried a small black case under one arm and moved with the same fluidity he always had, though his shoulders seemed lower than usual. "I trust the patient remains intact," Vel said. Helena didn't look up. "Mostly." "Don't touch anything." Vel stopped a meter from the bed, setting the case gently on the floor. "I have reviewed the footage. Your performance was inconsistent but effective. You exceeded my projections by a margin of 21%. Owen gave a small, tired shrug. "Guess I'm just full of surprises. Your species continues to resist categorical assessment. You lack obvious physical superiority, and yet your capacity to endure appears disproportionate to your biological limitations." Helena turned, one eyebrow raised. "That's one way to say you almost died but didn't." "I am attempting to refine the terminology," Vel replied. Owen reached for the cup again, wincing as his ribs protested. "You came all the way here just to say that." "No. I have brought a sample." He opened the case and withdrew a rectangular device emitting a soft green pulse. It projected a hovering screen in the air above the bed, displaying a series of graphs and symbols. "This is your telemetry during the final segment. Observe the fluctuations in cardiovascular rhythm, the irregularity of movement, the thermal spikes." Helena leaned in, frowning. "That's not standard fatigue response. That's a full-blown stress cascade. You should have collapsed 20 minutes earlier." "I tried," Owen said. "It is not merely stubbornness," Vel added. "There was a shift in neural patterning at kilometer 110, a surge of activity in sectors associated with pain suppression and memory recall. It appears you were accessing stored experiences to override present trauma." Owen blinked. "You're saying I ran on nostalgia, imprecise, but not incorrect," Helena straightened. "That happens sometimes. People hit a point where the body's done, but there's still something pushing from upstairs. It's rare, though. Usually ends in renal failure or worse." Vel turned his gaze toward her. "Are you suggesting this behavior is pathological?" "I'm suggesting it's a bad idea," she said. "But humans do bad ideas really well." Owen chuckled, then winced and clutched his side. "Can we not make me laugh?" "I think my rib's trying to secede." Helena snapped her fingers toward the wall. An assistant drone zipped in, buzzing softly, and began scanning Owen's chest with a handheld imager. Vel continued watching the projected data, eyes narrowing slightly. "I wish to understand the origin of this compulsion. Your ability to persist against self-preservation logic contradicts evolutionary efficiency." "Maybe that's why we're still around," Owen said. "We do stuff even if it makes no sense." "Especially if it makes no sense. Intellectually unsatisfying," Vel replied. "We're not here to satisfy your thesis defense," Helena said, tapping on the drone's interface. "He needs rest, not interrogation." Vel looked between them and stepped back. "I will return tomorrow." "There is much to analyze." As he exited, Helena turned toward Owen again, her tone softer. "You know he's trying to figure out if you're a statistical outlier or just part of a pattern." "Not sure myself," Owen murmured. "Maybe I'm just the guy who didn't stop." She adjusted the blanket over him and dimmed the projection. "You're lucky. If you'd gone another 5 kilometers, your kidneys might have shut down. I'd have crawled." That's not a compliment, Owen. Later that night, the wind outside the facility howled across the Mongolian steppe. The medical wing's outer shell vibrated faintly. Owen lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hiss of oxygen flow and the distant hum of the environmental systems. He wasn't in pain anymore, at least not the sharp kind. Just a deep, dull soreness that had settled into his bones like thick fog. Helena had given him something to help him sleep, but it hadn't kicked in yet. The door opened again softly, but not silently. A new figure entered. This one was shorter than Vel by half, with a twisted, wiry frame and a head shaped like a sideways teardrop. The alien's skin was the shade of rust, and its eyes were large, multifaceted, and glimmered faintly in the low light. It approached the bed and paused, tilting its head. "You're the human," it said in a voice that sounded like gravel being stirred in water. "Still am," Owen replied. "I watched the race. You defied 4 projections. 2 of our analysts are reevaluating their career paths. Glad to be of service." The alien tapped its chest. "My designation is Tren. I represent the Huvast Consortium. We are interested in rare evolutionary anomalies." Flattering. "We do not flatter. We collect data. Your biology is inefficient, yet your outcome was favorable. This contradiction intrigues us." Owen rubbed his temple. "Why does everyone keep acting like I'm some kind of biological paradox? I'm a middle-aged man who runs sometimes and doesn't know when to quit. That's it." Tren stared at him for a moment longer. "Do you experience satisfaction from suffering?" "No, I just don't like losing. Even when the cost is physical degradation, especially then." Tren leaned closer. "Fascinating, you may be dangerous." Owen laughed gently, then winced again. "Only to myself." Tren left without another word. By morning, Helena returned with a tablet in hand and a fresh bandage for his elbow. She looked less tired but more annoyed. "You've got 4 interview requests from alien media panels, one from a species that doesn't even breathe oxygen. Do I have to?" "Not unless you want to be famous in 6 galaxies." He stared at the ceiling a moment. "What do I get if I say no?" "Peace and quiet." Which, judging by how this week's gone, might be a first. He grinned through cracked lips. "Sign me up for obscurity." She replaced his Roman 4 bag and sat back down. "They're going to keep testing you, you know, not just you other humans too." "You opened a door." "Somebody had to." Helena didn't reply right away. Then she said, "Don't let them make you into a mascot." "I won't," Owen said. "I'm too sore to wave." He drifted off again, this time without resistance. The machines hummed quietly beside him, and outside, the wind kept sweeping across the plateau, carrying with it the whispers of a race that should have broken him but didn't. 2 days after the race, Owen's body had stopped feeling like it belonged to someone else. The swelling in his ankle had gone down enough that he could get to the bathroom without wobbling like a newborn colt, and the hairline rib fracture stopped screaming every time he sneezed. Helena still insisted he wear the monitor cuff, and he wasn't allowed to climb stairs or lift anything heavier than a sandwich. He was sitting in the communal recovery garden, really just a glass-roofed greenhouse with oxygen-enriched air and padded benches, when the first alien he hadn't met before approached him. It was about the size of a large dog, covered in dark teal scales arranged in overlapping rows, and walked upright on 2 legs that bent the wrong way. 2 antennae wavered gently from the top of its triangular head. "You are the soft-tissued participant," it said, voice high and rattly. "Depends who you ask," Owen said. He set down the protein bar he'd been eating. "You here to ask me how I didn't fall apart halfway through the run?" The alien's eyelids horizontal, like sliding doors closed and opened once. "I am Vrick. I represent the Drassel Observation Cluster. We are not concerned with the outcome. We wish to understand your behavioral deviation. Guess that depends on what normal's supposed to be. We observed multiple opportunities during which you could have ceased movement and preserved structural integrity. Yet you did not. Why continue?" Owen looked out through the glass ceiling. The sky was clear, pale blue, a kind of color that didn't seem to exist in any of the alien habitats. "Hard to explain," he said. "But maybe it's because I've quit before. Jobs, people, things I thought I wasn't strong enough to finish. I wanted to know what it felt like to stick it out." Vrick tilted its head. You engaged in a physically damaging act to resolve an emotional uncertainty. Owen picked up the protein bar again. Yeah, that sounds about right. The alien made a low clicking noise. You are inefficient in alarming ways. That's probably the nicest thing anyone's said to me this week. Vrick turned and walked away without another word. Owen was getting used to aliens doing that. Later that afternoon, he was cleared to leave the medical wing, provided he didn't attempt any vigorous movement or unauthorized terrain engagement. He translated that to mean, don't run, don't fall off anything, and don't try to reenact the race for curious delegates. The Hall of Comparative Physiology was quiet when he ducked in, leaning slightly on the walking stick Helena had reluctantly issued him. The walls were lined with floating models of various species' anatomical structures. Some were encased in transparent columns, slowly rotating, with labels in half a dozen languages. He wandered past a depiction of the skeletal structure of the Silhians' graceful, webbed creatures with hollow bones, and paused at a model of Vel's species. Their long, double-jointed limbs were supported by a fibrous mesh that looked more like tree root systems than muscle. You did not use the lifting chair, Vel's voice came from behind a column. Owen turned. I'm walking, not jumping hurdles. You are favoring your left side. Is the pain increasing? I'm fine. Vel studied him for a moment. You are not required to remain here. The analysis phase has concluded. I know. Just curious about how the rest of you are built. Vel approached the model of his own physiology and pointed at a cluster of overlapping filaments near the shoulder. These structures distribute shock through the torso, allowing sustained motion without internal damage. You mean you don't get sore? Our species lacks the necessary receptors for what you would classify as soreness. We repair as we move. Jealous. Vel folded his arms, watching Owen lean slightly against the display table. You could have ended your participation at multiple intervals. Our monitoring systems would have ensured you experienced no judgment. I didn't do it for judgment. You did it for self-definition. Owen nodded. Close enough. Vel's gaze lingered on the human for a long time. In your history, endurance has often been a survival mechanism rather than a virtue. Still is. Then you are not anomalous, merely optimized for a different context. Owen ran a hand through his hair. You think I'm just a product of bad conditions and stubborn wiring. I think you are a reminder that evolution does not favor beauty, it favors persistence. They stood in silence for a while. A group of delegates passed through the far corridor, speaking in a language that sounded like wind through reeds. I heard a rumor, Owen said finally. That next year's event might be on a water-based planet. Correct. The course will include aquatic segments and variable pressure zones. Most species will require adaptive equipment. Owen raised an eyebrow. You planning to run it? I am considering it. The data was inconclusive. Owen grinned. Then I guess I'll need to start swimming laps. You would participate again. If I can walk without wincing by next month, yeah. Vel's antennae twitched faintly, an expression Owen had learned meant something between skepticism and interest. You understand that statistical probability places you at a disadvantage. Hasn't stopped me yet. The next morning, Helena met Owen outside the facility's main dome, where the shuttles were preparing for departure. He had his duffel bag slung over one shoulder and the walking stick resting lightly against his hip. You're cleared for flight, she said, handing him a data chip. Medical summaries on there, follow-up recommendations. You'll need another scan in 2 weeks. He took the chip and tucked it into his jacket. Thanks for not pulling me when you could have. I almost did. I know. She looked at him for a long moment. You're not going to turn this into a career, are you? I don't think I could handle the interviews. That's not what I'm worried about. He smiled, tired but honest. I'm not trying to prove anything anymore. I just want to see how far I can go without falling apart. Helena shook her head. That's exactly what worries me. They didn't hug. She wasn't the type, but she did give his shoulder a brief squeeze before turning back toward the dome. As he climbed the shuttle ramp, Owen spotted Vel standing near the edge of the landing pad, arms behind his back, watching the departure preparations. Their eyes met briefly. No words were exchanged. The shuttle doors closed with a soft hiss, and Owen settled into his seat, wincing only slightly as his ribs adjusted. Outside the window, the steppe stretched into the distance, wind rippling across the grass in long, slow waves. He didn't know if he'd ever come back. But he knew now that even among creatures who could bend gravity and outpace machines, there was something singular about a species that kept going not because it was easy, but because it was hard. And that somehow made it enough.